Over the past 10 years, the indie game genre has exploded in popularity. Smaller teams and solo developers have proven they can make games with the same level of quality as AAA studios. In fact, some indie games have even gone on to receive the same level of respect and recognition as big budget games.
Hi Mom and Dad, I love you.
Like ones where 90% of their budget was spent on advertising and 10% on finishing the game. But out of all the great indie games out there, one stands out above the rest in terms of impact: Shovel Knight. Released on June 26, 2014 for PC, 3DS, and Wii U, Shovel Knight took a very different approach to graphics than most games at the time. It deliberately set out to look like an NES game, abiding by the limitations that came with the console. That meant using a limited color palette, with some exceptions, an old school soundtrack using Famitracker, and a simple story that fit right in with games at the time. Thanks to all of these touches and an unprecedented amount of charm, the game was a massive success, receiving critical acclaim from users and gaming news outlets. Even before the game was released, when it was initially just a dingy Kickstarter campaign, people seemed to have good faith in the project. It ended up receiving 4 times the initial goal and met every single stretch goal. A few of them included playable boss knights. As promised, they released 3 separate campaigns that allowed you to play as villains for the low price of nothing, which is a bit less than the cost of most DLC. Holy shit. These games included Plague of Shadows starring Plague Knight, King of Cards starring King Knight, and the subject of today's video, Specter Knight in Specter of Torment. Specter of Torment is without a doubt the best game in the entire Treasure Trove package. But why? How could a game that tried to follow up this already immaculate platformer exceed it in every way? And why am I talking about this when I should be stopping the fire in my house? In this video, I'll be talking about the strengths of the Shovel of Hope campaign and how they were enhanced in Specter of Torment, with a brief discussion of Plague of Shadows thrown in there for good measure. This video will cover these 2 campaigns in depth, so if you haven't played these games, this is your spoiler warning. With that out of the way, let's begin. Control is something that makes or breaks a 2D platformer. If the character isn't fun to control, it can sour the rest of the experience. Shovel Knight excels at this by giving the player lots of verticality. When you jump in Shovel Knight, you jump high. In terms of the game's height, you can jump about 2 large blocks up with your standard jump. Keep that in mind. If you want to gain even more height, you can hold down while falling to hold your shovel downward and bounce on objects and enemies. Gaining height is essential in games like these because otherwise the platforming feels very empty and hollow. Shovel Knight's controls work, but they feel very basic, like they're following the bare minimum requirements. Compare that to Specter of Torment. Specter Knight's controls take away certain elements of Shovel Knight's controls and replace them with something even better. First off, your standard jump isn't as high as it used to be. You can only jump the height of 1 big block, cutting your potential height in half. And the game makes it very easy for you to fall back down, as whenever you jump off a breakable surface, it breaks. Luckily, the game still allows you to reach the lofty heights that were once achievable. If you keep moving toward a wall, Specter Knight does a short wall run where he can either climb up to the nearest edge, do a wall jump, or do a sick backflip where he lands on his ass. You can also swing your scythe through the air by attacking an airborne enemy or object, kinda like the homing attack from Sonic the Hedgehog. These moves give you a much more flashy and flexible way of gaining height that simply using a bouncy shovel doesn't accomplish. On top of that, Specter Knight's moveset is really admirable when you look at how much effort went into designing it. If we slow down the footage of Specter Knight running up a wall, we can see that this animation contains almost 14 unique frames just for this 1-second animation. It's an incredible amount of effort that Yacht Club didn't have to do, but they did it anyway. These actions are used expertly throughout the whole game, and by the end, you're using your moveset to pull off insane combos that feel like they belong in Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Speaking of which, another neat mechanic of this game is the ability to grind on rails with your scythe. You can even jump and do a kickflip before immediately falling because you were too busy thinking about how cool you were. It doesn't add anything to gameplay, but it's still a neat addition that shows how many uses your weapon has. There's even a cloak you can buy in this game that allows you to grind on everything and everyone. From the moment you start this game, it's already very clear that Specter of Torment is about evil. This makes sense since the game is from the perspective of a villain. The jovial and hopeful world map that inspired you to venture is gone. Instead, your main hub world is the Tower of Fate. all the shops and NPCs live in this tower, and they all have the same level of charm as their good counterparts. However, I think Yacht Club did a much better job this time around because the characters are a lot more interesting. They have funnier dialogue and their backstories are very fleshed out. There's a vulture bartender who wants nothing to do with you. There's a salesman made up of hundreds of little rat things. There's even like a literal Red Skull straight out of the MCU who is searching for his wife and asks you to find her by searching each level. This whole hub world just reeks of personality, and it's funny when you realize that these people are all technically bad guys. They work for the Enchantress and they want to see the world burn, but they all have hopes and dreams that you want to see come true. Now, as for the levels, I am not an expert in what makes good game design. I tried reading The Art of Game Design a few months ago, but then I realized my time could be better spent doing something less productive. However, I can still recognize when designers put genuine effort into the levels and when they don't. What do I mean by that? Well, let's briefly discuss Plague of Shadows, the expansion that came out before Specter of Torment. This campaign is basically playing the same levels from Shovel of Hope, but with a different character. No, really, the level design was hardly changed for this new game. Seriously, if I took out the characters and showed you 2 screenshots from the same levels of each campaign, would you be able to tell the difference? It's like they took the original level, popped it in the editor, and went, yeah, whatever, that's fine. I get that this was the first new campaign, so they were probably finding their footing, but when you compare this to Specter of Torment, one obviously takes the cake in terms of evolving Shovel Knight. Specter of Torment's level design is unique, designed with their moveset in mind, and still retains a lot of the aesthetic choices from Shovel of Hope. In fact, some levels have an added level of detail to them that wasn't present in Shovel Knight. A few of them start at an earlier point in their, timeline. Before entering the stranded ship, you start out on the shore, and before entering the volcano, you start in this semi-underground shaft, where miners might have been digging for something. There's an added element of environmental storytelling in this game that is just so lifelike. It feels like this is the story the developers really wanted to tell, but couldn't deliver it through Shovel Knight. Oh, and do I even have to mention the soundtrack? Jay Kaufman is like the John Williams of chiptune songs. His work on Shantae and Crypt of the Necrodancer is great, but it doesn't even come close to these bangers. He even manages to change the tone of most songs, and it pays off in dividends by making some tracks sound more mysterious or depressing, or making some sound even more jovial. Now, obviously this game takes heavy inspiration from many games of the 8-bit era, Super Mario Bros. 3, Castlevania, DuckTales, and Mega Man. Mega Man being the most obvious because a lot of elements from Shovel Knight are borrowed directly from Mega Man, one of them being the bosses. Each of these bosses has unique personality traits and dialogue to give them more characterization. They're also accompanied by an appropriately themed stage and a more epic arrangement of the level theme for their fight. They're already amazing in Shovel of Hope, but in Specter of Torment the bosses are on another level. When you start each fight, it seems like things haven't changed since the last time you fought. But then, after a few seconds, the fight drastically changes. My favorite example in this game is Treasure Knight. In the normal campaign, you fight the scuba diver underwater since it fits the theme of the level, and throughout the level you've also learned that water gives you more floatiness in the air, making you jump higher and fall slower. Since you can use your airstrike as much as you want provided there are enemies nearby, you can just keep going up in the air and bitch slapping everyone that's below you. When you get to Treasure Knight, you assume this fight will be easy, as attacking him in the water almost seems like cheating. Might as well take a nap if I'm gonna. Oh, fuck. Yeah, Treasure Knight drains the water in his arena to prevent you from soaring above him, making the fight a bit tougher. It's such an unexpected twist that largely affects the way you fight the boss. I mean, the game's conditioned you to think that the fight won't be different by using the same music and attack pattern at the start of the fight, so a twist like this is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Another great example of these twists is Mole Knight. In the Lost City, you encounter a lot of these green blocks that knock you back a great distance when you hit them. Sometimes they'll knock you back far enough to land in lava. By the time you reach Mole Knight, you built up a hatred for these stupid jello boxes, so when you start the fight expecting him to use the standard red lava blocks and he pulls out these, it's surprising, but it's also fucking genius. It shakes up the player's expectations and makes them think, oh, I wonder what twist the next boss is gonna have, and the game rarely disappoints. It's like the bosses were so mad that they didn't beat Shovel Knight the first time, so they learned their lesson and created new attacks. It's just brilliant. Okay, also, I know people are going to comment to this. Yes, Specter of Torment is a prequel to Shovel of Hope, so how would they have learned their mistake from the future? That doesn't make sense. But this is a much better way of explaining it, and I think a lot of people don't really care, so just Shut up. All of the elements I talked about do enhance the game, they really do, but I'm not going to ignore it any longer. The most unique and captivating aspect of this game compared to its predecessor. So iconic that they put it in the marketing, like everywhere. The story. A lot of the marketing for this game calls Specter of Torment a tragic prequel, and that's not a lie. The game revolves around a locket that contains your humanity, and helping the big bad bitch is the only way to restore it. Specter Knight is being held captive by this monster, and assembling an army is the only way to escape. It's a really depressing setup that sets the tone for the rest of the story, but it only gets worse. It's revealed that Specter Knight used to go by Donovan, and had a friend named Luan. Luan? Eluan? They originally snuck into the Tower of Fate searching for an amulet to help someone. We're not told who, but apparently he means a lot to these two. Eventually they reach the top floor and find the amulet, only to be stopped by Shield Knight, who ends up becoming the damsel in distress for Shovel Knight. Donovan and Shield Knight fight, and as the tower begins to crumble, Luan wonders if this is actually worth it. However, Donovan doesn't care. He knocks Luan aside and tries to grab the amulet, but it's too late. He falls into the abyss and wakes up to find the Enchantress staring him in the face. Left with no options, he begs the evil queen for help, and she offers to let him live if he helps her. It's at this point Donovan can't return to normal. He transforms into the deathly figure we now know, bearing the same helm he wore before. This is such an important moment in the game because it finally explains why we should feel sorry for this guy. He is trapped in an endless state of servitude, with the only escape being malice. He's forced to wander endlessly, only with a sliver of hope. Fast forward to present day. While Specter Knight is recruiting, a kid named Reese breaks into the tower and Specter Knight seems to be familiar with him. The Enchantress is having none of this, so she transforms him into Dark Reese, and he takes over the teleporter mirror thingy. This doesn't last long, however, as Black Knight also breaks into the tower. He mentions he's searching for Shield Knight and discovers the Enchantress is her new form. It's at this point Specter Knight's world is shattered. His friend, his treasure, and his life were all taken away by the person he was serving. Furious with this, Specter Knight journeys through the tower to face off the wicked bitch of the West. You reach the final room and beat the Enchantress, but in true video game fashion, it's not over. She calls Reese forward and transforms him into this giant demon thing you have to fight on a rail. It's fine. Reese is defeated, so everything should be normal, right? No. The Enchantress threatens to kill Reese after having failed her. But then, something amazing happens. Specter Knight, the man who spent this entire game working to get his life back, sacrifices everything to save this child's life. He crushes the locket and turns Reese back to normal, saving one's life while taking his own. Now, Specter Knight is forever bound to the Enchantress and becomes the boss you know and love. After arriving at the Lick Yard, Specter Knight has one more flashback, where he talks with Luan about promising to protect someone important. You're family to me, and I hope you would be family to Reese. The kid Donovan was protecting was his best friend's son. He ends up swearing to lay down his life for Reese's, and fulfills it by giving him a new home. Specter of Torment keeps everything that made the original campaign effective and kicks things up a notch. Better storytelling, better levels, better mechanics. It's a true evolution of the game's formula, and is without a doubt the best campaign in the entire package. Now, to make it seem like Yacht Club Games aren't paying me shitloads to talk about their game, I will bring up some negative points. The cloaks you can buy are pretty useless. Most don't have a good lasting effect, and even the skater gear is only good for aesthetic purposes. Also, it would have been nice to see more unique enemies. Like, they reuse a lot of them from the other campaigns, but I think King of Cards took care of that complaint. Honestly though, I don't care. This game is fun, charming, endlessly replayable, and well worth your time. Thank you for watching.